machine into a photo sync. So that would actually allow you to set up a slide machine and sync your photos. But otherwise, it's the same basic Roberts machine.
Did you think he did a nice job telling the story about Roberts recorders?
I thought he covered it pretty well.
That's 1, 2, 3, Dad.
Testing. 3, 2, 1.
That sounds good. You started doing electronics pretty early in your life.
Yes, I built my first crystal set at 9 years old.
And where did you go from there? I mean, what brought you the next...
Well, I went to Caltech,
Okay.
and I learned technical electronics, which I didn't know before. I knew amateur electronics. I was a ham radio operator.
Okay.
Well, I had the first class,
Wow.
actually I had first class radio telephone commercial,
Oh.
but I never used it. You know what happened? I got that at 16 years old when they told me at KFWB they couldn't hire anybody that wasn't a first-class radio telephone operator, thinking to get rid of me. Well, I studied for, I think, about 5 weeks, and I came back and I said, I'm now a first-class radio telephone commercial operator,
Wow.
and I hope you'll give me a job. And he said, I can't give a job to a 16-year-old. Why didn't he tell me that in the first place?
Right, exactly. So this is like we're talking the 1930s?
This was in the 1930s, yes.
Right.
No, wait a minute.
You were born in 1917, so you would have been 1933?
Yeah, about
Wow, okay.
33.
Right. What did you do after that?
After that, I went to college,
Okay.
to Caltech.
And you majored in electronics?
Yes.
Okay.
No, in electrical engineering.
Okay. All right.
Tell them about your first job.
I went to Caltech, and the schoolmate said there's a job at Hadley Transformer Company.
All right.
So he wasn't going to take it, so it was down South Los Angeles. I went down there and applied for the job and got it at Hadley's. And it was a terrible job. I didn't like what they had me working on, so my mother had a attorney who came to her with a job, and so she brought it to me at Hadley, and it was at a record company, but the Hadley had me working on how many transformers I could get into a portable case.
Oh.
And I knew that wasn't the way to go.
Right.
So I went to I was very unethical. I went to the company that my mother heard about the job from and told him that that if he wanted a lightweight player, he couldn't go to a transformer company.
Right.
that I could make him a player that had no transformers. So, which I did, and I got the job.
Okay.
And from then I was at
Allied Phonograph.
Thank you, my prompter.
That's good. Thank you very much.
The portable phonographs were actually not portable phonographs, they were portable transcription players.
Okay.
And at that time, all of the radio programs were on 16-inch transcriptions, which had been originally, and very few people know this, the original sound pictures. I forget what they call it now, but anyway, that was done on a 16-inch transcription, and the salesmen for their programs had to have something to play. And I made the players for the 16-inch transcriptions, which was small. I gotta tell this anecdote. I was dating the daughter of a very wealthy and famous drug manufacturer, who called me in one day, and he said, tell me, what do you do? And I told him I made transcription players. He said, well, what are they for? And I said, well, they're salesmen for the industry that uses 16-inch transcriptions, which Vitaphone was the first one. And he said, well, how many do you sell a month? I said, about 30. He said, for how much money? And I told him. He said, that's not a business. This was what I thought was going to be my future father-in-law.
Oh, not what you want to hear?
That's not what I wanted to hear. So anyway, it's a sideline.
Yes, those are sometimes the best.
So I worked at Allied Phonograph and Record for quite some time, and I got a continuing morning job while I went to Caltech, which paid for my tuition at Caltech.
To help. So Bob had a situation settled at Caltech to get his education in the morning from 8 to noon. He had 4 classes. He then would get in his little Model T Ford
Model A.
at 10 cents a gallon of gas at that time. He had 20 cents to put into his tank for 2 gallons of gas, which would take him from Caltech to home and back. And he then had a job with Hadley Transformer and worked in the afternoon from 1 to 6 o'clock. And he then would race back to Caltech to have dinner and to study until midnight. And that was what he did for 4 years.
Wow.
No play, no entertainment. He had his education at Caltech, and then he worked in the afternoon for Hadley Transformer.
Wow.
He made the arrangement with Caltech at that time to turn over his $20 a week that he got at Hadley to give to Caltech, which gave him his education, and they gave him his room and board for $20 a week. Today, it is now $40,000 per student to get into Caltech.
Wow. Wow.
I don't think at that time that there were any others that went to school and worked
Like that.
It was a very difficult thing. He was an all-A student, and he said because of his work, it dropped. He wasn't an A student all the time, but he made his way for the 4 years, and he graduated in 4 years. And that's when he went to work for Allied Phonograph and Record.
Oh, okay.
Right after that.
Wow.
So it was a tough go for him for a lot of years in the business. He had to do a lot of traveling. We figured out that during the early time of our marriage, with all of the times of travel that he had to all of the dealers all over the country, because he was selling mainly to schools.
Right.
Schools bought his equipment.
Right.
And in that time,
We were apart one whole year.
Wow. Wow.
Not in consecutive.
Right.
I mean, in the total.
When you added it up. Right.
wow,
Was that mostly turntables that you were selling to schools? Or was it recorders and everything?
No, turntables. At Pacific Sound, the war broke out, and we got a job with the quartermaster depot in Kansas City to make military equipment. They were similar to the ordinary equipment, except that they were in metal cornered olive drab boxes.
Right.
And very heavy, but they served the purpose of the military.
Right. Yeah, that's quite a different kind of packaging.
Yeah. We were making transcription players for the military.
Okay.
My company, which I had founded, was called Pacific Sound Equipment. And it was making military equipment as long as the war lasted. But the minute the war stopped, I was no longer deferred. When I learned that the war was over and that they were closing down our enterprise, I was on the way back to the Kansas City quartermaster depot to tell them that I was going to be inducted and I could no longer work. And on the way back at Albuquerque, they paged me to come to the desk. And I went to the desk expecting that I'd been kicked off by somebody with a Class 2 priority.
Right.
And instead, they said, we're happy to inform you that you've just been put in Class 2B for an indefinite period.
That's great. That's great.
So I was deferred.
and I think you should also mention the fact that you got the Army Navy E for production under Pacific Sound Equipment Company.
While we were still in Pacific Sound Equipment Company, I was called to a meeting with a colonel. What was the colonel's name?
The colonel was married to Loretta Young. He became famous because of her.
Anyway.
Oh, right. Okay.
So anyway, he made me independent of the military contracts, and I now had peacetime contracts which were sufficient to keep me in business. What happened was that at the end of World War II, I had a $300,000 inventory of military goods, olive drab goods, which you weren't going to sell to anybody for anything. It was sold in bankruptcy.
Right.
So now I founded another company. I went down to Vernon first because I couldn't afford the rent up in the Hollywood where we'd been.
Right.
And I got some backing from my mother that helped to move back to Hollywood. And I should say, I got a partner, Bill Moss, who was had money he had inherited. And then I had to start over again, which I did with a paper mache sombrero hat with a phonograph inside of it. And my business partner at that time had a sister who was an artist, and she painted flowers on the hat, and we called it California Phonograph, which became Califone, and which is still in business.
Yes. I cannot tell you how many schools and organizations I've worked with where their key equipment was Califone for years.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I manufactured them for many years, here's an interesting historical fact.
Okay.
My girlfriend at the time was going to, what's the name of the girls' school up north? Dick?
Your friend, she went to Mills.
Mills College, that's right. She was going to Mills College up north. And I was sitting in the waiting room for her, because I was always waiting for her. And they put a head out and said, does anybody here know how to fix a phonograph? And I volunteered, and I see it's one of these old Victor's wind-ups. And I said, is this all you have? And she said, yeah. I said, where do they come from? They come from the audiovisual department. Well, who's in charge of that? And they said, it's Gardner Hart. So I found out his office was on 2nd Street, and I happened to have one of our electronic players in my car. So I took it to him, and he ordered 4 of them. And so that's how I met the head of audiovisual for Oakland Schools. And they bought a number of our units. That gave us the edge into the school phonograph departments, because all I had to do was give Gardner Hart as a reference. The one thing I prided myself on, we made our own pickup arms. And they were primitive, but very adequate for 16-inch transcriptions, because at that time you had to pay a fortune to get one. So I made our own arms, which was a brass tube with a plastic head on it, and which would take any crystal. School business became the major factor in our business. As you can see, Califone is still in business today.
I know.
Well, I started out by traveling around to the schools, and the first Caliphones were sold by me. And then when we got big enough that we could afford to have a dealer, then we set up a dealer organization, and we had 300 dealers around the country.
And I see here that you designed a variable speed control for square dancing.
I made the first variable speed control phonographs, because all phonographs at that time were either 78 or 33 1/3. Right. There was no way to adjust it in between. So the square dance industry needed a means of varying the speed, and I made a variable speed, I patented a variable speed induction motor. The reason they weren't variable speed is induction motors were famous for being one fixed speed. And I did it by combining two numbers of poles, and I called it varipole.
Okay.
And I patented it under the name varipole, so that you could make speeds in between the 33 1/3 and 78.
Right. Wow. Nothing like being motivated by square dancing.
That's right. Well, there was a lot of them in those days. They were our biggest part of our business.
Really?
Oh, I made a variable speed wind-up phonograph that had the two speeds.
Okay.
And so I had to be able to stop. In those days, you stopped the wind-up motor with a brake. Mm-hmm. Well, all of a sudden I had to have two brakes. Mm-hmm. And how are you going to tell them apart? Well, I made it so that when you switched from one speed to the other, that you switched from one brake to the other.
Cool, yeah.
That's in my pants there somewhere.
Wow.
One day I saw an ad in the Hollywood newspaper where my company was located that said, Girl Friday is good at shorthand and typing and all that. So I called her and hired her, and she became the secretary for my company. Her name is Jerry Langsner.
Oh.
She was from New York.
You had formed the Roberts Electronics at the same time?
It's Bob Craig who was the distributor.
Oh, he's a distributor.
For my company.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know him. He was Craig Movie Supply, which is probably still in business. I don't know. But
did he also do the Craig tape recorder company in that, or was
yeah,
that somebody?
That was his company, and we worked together. He was the distributor for my tape recorders.
Right. Wow.
And unfortunately, he died rather young.
Really? Wow. Okay.
But I had known him actually when he came out of the Army. He was sort of a novice in the business, and we worked closely together because his father, Tallman Craig, had been my distributor.
Wow.
So anyway, the
it's
Craig company is the same company.
Okay.
The first Roberts was made while I was partner with Bob Craig.
Okay. When you first started with the Roberts recorders, you had the double R logo?
Yes, and I got a letter from a attorney in a small town in Sussex, I think it was. They represented the Rolls-Royce company that had worldwide rights to the double-linked R's. So I had to cease and desist. So I have on my board there, I have a picture of the one that we made with the double-linked R's, which we could never market because they got a order against us for worldwide.
It kept evolving into a lot refined logo as you went.
Uh-huh. But never another interlinked R.
No, right.
I wasn't going to tangle with the attorneys in England.
Right, exactly.
My brother-in-law, who was working for me, said, that machine over there. I said, what's that machine doing here? It was Friday night, and I didn't like to have anything laying outside after hours on Friday because I was going home. Right. And he said, that belongs to an interesting couple who are using it in some kind of act. And he said, by the way, it's got an interesting motor in it. And I opened it up, and I saw what it was, and I said, I got to examine this. So I took it back to the shop, and I got the numbers off of it, and they were registered to Saburo Akai. So I got in touch with Akai. It's interesting. I said to him, if you were manufacturing it, I would like to get a distributorship, and if you're not, I would like to have the tooling to make it. Okay. So it turns out they sent me a brochure. They were making it. So that started the relationship with Akai, which extended all the way through my business activities. And that was the reason I learned to speak Japanese. I got a tutor, and I became comparatively fluent in Japanese.
But what a difference that makes to the relationship.
Well, it does, because I had learned from experience, having been in business for many years, that if you don't speak the language, they pull things on you. And I had two of my employees try to steal my business. That evidently had an innocent face.
Right.
And then I caught them and had them prosecuted for it.
Wow.
But that experience led me to be very careful with people.
You had such close ties to Akai. I mean, that was quite a relationship. I mean, Roberts and Akai lasted a long time.
That's right.
Lasted a long time.
Unfortunately, Mr. Akai died at the age of 57. So the personal relationship ceased at that point. Right. I still worked with them, but I didn't know anybody except their employees.
What about, I've always been curious, when Akai came out with the first tear recorders, did you influence how they looked or how their design was?
Yeah, when they first brought it to me, it was terrible. It was the lay-down type.
Oh, really?
You know, and copied after, I forget the name of the company here, but a very cheap company. Right. And I said, that's not the direction you should go. Right. You should go in the direction of the best, which is Ampex. Right. And I was the one that got them to make it look like Ampex. It came here and brought a primitive lay-down type tape recorder with a solid magnet for erase. And they said, this is so primitive. I said, they haven't been using it in this country for years. And he said, well, would you mind designing what should be in it? And I sent him back one of ours. By that time, we were copying Ampex, making them vertical. Right. And I sent him back one of these vertical units, and it was all transistor. Right. And I take credit for ruining the American electronics industry, because the Japanese copied that machine exactly, including the transistors. Right. So they were, instead of in Indianapolis making them, transistors were made in Japan. Wow. And that's how America lost the transistor industry.
Oh dear.
Blame moi.
Sorry.
What about the crossfield head?
And the crossfield head was a different problem. At that time, there was a limit to the frequency response of a tape recorder. They went only as high as the permanent magnet erase would allow them to, which was 5 kilohertz. Above 5 kilohertz, it all got erased. So I got the idea of putting the eraser on the opposite side, putting a second head on the opposite side for the crossfield. And that you can recognize him by the cross on the front. And that made it possible to record up to 10 kilohertz.
I read that later, probably due to your influence, that Akai did decide to make quality a really top priority.
That's right.
So you made a...
Because they first started, like everything Japanese, make it cheap.
Right, yeah.
And I convinced them that the money was not in the cheap, the money was making quality in Japan.
Right.
And they were the first company to make quality in Japan.
Did you ever go to Japan, or did they...
I made 12 trips to
12
Japan.
trips.
I speak Japanese.
Oh, wow, okay.
Hontonene.
Thank you.
And he learned Japanese too.
Wow. That's taking it very seriously. I mean, really getting into it.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting language. And a little anecdote I can tell. I was walking down the Ginza, and I forgot that I looked different. And I started saying hello to people, knowing that I could speak with them because it was my second language.
Right.
But everybody looked askance at me because I forgot that I was Caucasian.
That's good. That's good. When did you first go over there?
I went over there the first time on our trip around the world in 1958. That's right.
Oh, wow. Wow. So
And,
how long have you two been together? I should probably know this.
oh, we've been together quite a while.
When did you get married?
Did he say married?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not being intrusive.
Let's
No.
see, I'm almost 71.
We were
so
married.
We've been married about 60 years.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding.
No. No, we've been married 72 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank
What's
you.
that, dear?
Wow.
I just told them your secret.
What did you tell them?
That we've been married 72 years.
That's right. 1940.
Wow. Congratulations. Wow, right as the war was starting.
We had to be married. He's 70.
There you go. There you go. Good. I should get a shot of Richard, actually. I don't think I've got a shot. It's always good getting a shot of
It's Dr. Metzner.
Sure.
Yes, doctor, I'm sorry.
This is me shooting you, shooting me.
Thank you, yes.
Mhm.
I appreciate it. And I'll just get Chris shooting you, too. Might as well get all this. What? Did
So-
the Akai motor also turn into the Starlight, the Metzner Starlight?
No.
No, that's a different.
Oh, wait a minute. I should qualify that.
Okay.
I learned enough about the motor business to know how to contract for having the motors made. And so I knew there was a opening for professional motors. There was nobody making them here. And so I made the Metzner Starlight my project. And I won't go into the detail of that, but it was based on the principles that I learned with working with Akai. So a man came to me by the name of Davis and said that Ream wanted to get in the educational business because the government had just appropriated $4 billion for aid to education.
Wow.
And they wanted to get their share.
Right.
So that's why they bought my business.
Okay. Wow.
And that's when I sold out.
Was Mr. Davis the Jack Davis?
Jack Davis, yes.
Because he later had his signature on some of the units. This is a custom design by Jack Davis on some of the
That's right. That was after he came to work for Ream.
Okay.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
So you stayed with Roberts after Ream bought the company?
That's right.
Okay.
Ream bought Califone
Oh, right.
and Roberts later.
You did choose to stay and be a consultant in that. You wanted to still be involved with it.
Yeah. Well, what happened was, first they got a very prejudiced guy to work for them, and he decided that I was a crook. So he was out to, at every meeting, he would get up and say that what I was telling them was untrue. And I got to the point where I said, I'm not going to come to your meetings anymore, and they got rid of him. Then they got a fellow, a very nice fellow, named Pitney, Oaks Pitney, and he was from my same high school years later, and we got to be very good friends. Unfortunately, he was killed in an airplane accident. But anyway, from then on, they played my friend instead of my enemy.
Good.
Well, you saw the one in here?
Yes. That's one of my favorite machines, by the way. I've got two of those. I love that machine. I could not. Everybody that comes in, I show them how it reverses and just the speed on those motors. I mean, good grief, it's just amazing.
It was very, very good quality.
The photograph of it.
Yeah.
So
Okay, well, the little dial that's up at the top is my patent, and that made it possible to pick any part. See, before, when you had a phonograph, you could set it down anywhere, and you could play any part of it. Well, people didn't like tape that they couldn't play any part of, so I invented a select-o-matic. That's those two little dials up at the top. You can pick out the start and the stop of any part of the tape.
I've got two machines that is working beautifully still. It really, yeah.
So now you know where it came from.
Thank you. Thank you again. I have so much to thank you for. What was the tape recorder patent in that group? Was it a mechanism or the electronic?
No, it was the combination of a cassette and a reel-to-reel recorder.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you did that. And then they put an 8-track in one of them, which was...
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, that is the one. Okay. Wow.
The 8-track was the 33, that's right.
Okay, yeah. That is a fun machine to demonstrate. I had to actually merge a Roberts and an Akai to find all the workings that I could get to work, because there's a combination of motors in that that's incredible.
Those are great motors, aren't they?
Yes, yes, they are. Yeah, they really are.
Those are, I think they're Bodines.
Oh, are they? Yeah. Wow.
But the one in the die-cast box, the whole 2-speed motor in one box, that was made at Akai.
Okay. Wow.
Well, I was there.
Right. Were you involved with Roberts when they built the video recorder, the black and white combination video and audio recorder, the 1000, Roberts 1000?
I was only involved at the very beginning.
Roberts must have done a contract with Akai so that Akai didn't sell in the United States. Did you?
That's right. We had the Western Hemisphere distribution for Akai.
Okay. So you negotiated that with them?
Yes.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about that. Do you remember?
There was a very interesting thing about that. We had a reputation. I would spend 2 weeks at a time every year with Akai in bringing them up to date and getting everything arranged for the coming year. And I was no sooner home than Mr. Akai countermanded everything we had decided. And so I had to learn to live with that and have something else ready for that to happen.
Wow.
So I tied down the distributorship for Akai as well. And as their Southern California distributors, I was ready with either from Akai or from here.
Right, right. Yeah, I thought that was amazing that you were able to retain that, because I could see that Akai was selling in Europe and other places, but none of them appeared here unless somebody bought one and brought it over.
Well, but they paid me a royalty anyway.
Anyway, wow. Were you doing final assembly, or were you doing...
Yeah, we did the inspection of everything that came from Japan.
Okay.
So we did 100% inspection.
Okay.
Which was necessary because their inspection wasn't too good.
Really?
Well, one of the first things we learned was to test the metal.
Oh.
Because one of the first things that happened when we took apart the machines to inspect them, was the screw heads screwed off because they didn't use a proper metal.
Right.
And we had to correct that in Japan before they started selling anything here, because all they had to do is have a bunch of the screw heads come off, and the reputation for anything made in Japan would go bad.
Right. Exactly.
And we didn't dare have that happen.
Right.
So anyway, we got them to put a metallurgist to work and come up with a metal that was the quality of the American metal, so that their screw heads wouldn't come off.
Wow.
Well, we did 100% inspection here, and the result was that we raised the reputation for a Japanese-made product in America, which needed it at that time.
Right. Did you work with them on design of things like reversible machines?
Yeah, the reverse-o-matic was my invention.
Wow, okay. Okay, wow. And that was eventually used by a lot of people.
Yeah.
Concertone or...
Well, they bought the license from me, paid me $25,000 for my inventions.
Wow.
Which was a lot of money in those days.
Yes.
And so I let them use anything.
Right. Wow. What about all the celebrities that are in the ads for Roberts?
Oh, yes. I realized the need, being a company in Hollywood, to tie in Hollywood people. So the first one I got was Rudy Valley. Do you remember him?
Yes.
I got Rudy Valley to endorse our products.
I was just fascinated by the fact that the Roberts had so many ads like that. And even Craig had, I think, Stan Kenton at one point promoting the Craig line of recorders. And I just...
Yeah, but that was before I partnered with Craig.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
That was Tallman Craig, his father.
Oh, I went on. Okay. The first Roberts tape recorder I found an ad for was 58. Does that sound about right?
Well, that was the time Esther and I traveled around the world in 58.
Really?
And we brought that information to many countries at that time.
Wow. Wow, okay.
That's why I say I ruined the American transistor industry.
Right, exactly.
Because I was carrying transistors made in Indiana.
How many employees did you have, like in the heyday of the company?
265.
Wow.
What was that?
We were a relatively medium-sized business.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many Roberts recorders were sold over time, or even a guesstimate?
I can't remember what happened yesterday.
I hate to tell you that I'm having the same problem.
His short memory is lacking, but his long memory is wonderful.
So how many Roberts tape recorders did we sell?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, hundreds, I think.
Thousands.
Thousands.
Well, we
What
had...
about all the phonographs
Well,
and the...
Bob Craig overnight got me nationwide distribution because the Craig Corporation had connections everywhere. So as his partner, I was introduced everywhere.
You did tell him Robert's recorders came from Robert Craig and Robert Metzner. That's how they became Robert's recorders.
Okay. I wondered that, if that wasn't what it was, right? After you were bought out by Ream, did Craig stay with you, or was
No, he made sure that he got his share, though.
Oh, okay. To know a little bit more about the car, because you mentioned that was in the museum here. How did you get started in designing that? And
Well, how did it start? My partner at the time was a aircraft repairman, and he was a welder. And so he did the welding and I did the electrical.
Okay.
And it now mentions in the museum that the two of us built it.
Well, good. Wow.
It was the first hybrid.
Wow.
Not the first hybrid, that was 1902, but the first modern hybrid.
Right. So you said you went to Ford. You presented at
I
Ford.
spent 5 days at Ford, and I presented my ideas for the hybrid car, and they didn't buy it. They paid for my 5 days, but they didn't do anything about it. Then all of a sudden the whole industry moved into it.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about the patent, if you would.
They waited till my patent expired.
Wow. And that was 1972 when you started that, or 70?
55 was when we started it, so
Wow.
in 75 my patent had expired.
Wow.
And that's when they started marketing them.
Right.
But isn't that sweet?
No.
They make millions, billions, and they wouldn't pay my royalties. They wait, keep the public waiting for 20 years so that they could not pay me a royalty. Not that I needed it.
You patented a technique to keep the distance between cars. That came after, I guess, the electric.
No, that was Dick will tell you, when he was a kid, he and I worked on the idea of having, what was it?
We had an idea for running cables under cities with magnets
Under the streets.
Under the streets, and then everybody's car would have a magnet on the bottom of it, and they would be controllable so that you could actually turn them, and you'd be able to switch from one, you know, the cable that ran down 6th Street, you could go over to 3rd Avenue, and then the idea came up to program them with computers so that you'd actually be able to just hit a button, and it would be able to make all the transformations to get you from point A to point B. And you could read the newspaper while your car drove you.
Right.
And he patented that.
And that is only just now coming into use.
Exactly.
When was that?
That was over 20 years ago.
Probably 1949, 1950.
Wow. Well, you grew up around all this then, right?
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, I remember the. I remember the transformation of our life. In the Califone days, we had one lifestyle, and then when Dad sold to Ream, this house appeared. I was in college at the time, and you know, so it was a big transformation in the way they lived.
Right, but at least, thank goodness, they recognized the value of what you've done.
They wanted to get. The government had made an appropriation of $4 million for education.
Right.
And Ream had a man by the name of Jack Davis working for him. And Jack Davis said, Ream should get a few of those billion.
Yeah.
So they became very interested into it.
Right.
And that was the way that I was bought out. And,
what about Hear See Now? Is that?
He got the idea when my mom started losing her hearing to create a way that people could wear like a screen like he could wear a screen, and when he would say things to her, his words would be written out, like having your own captions. You know, like movies have captions.
Wow.
A walking caption system for people who are hard of hearing, so that their partners would be able to talk and they could read what they say. So you know.
Did I patent that? Did I patent that?
No, you were using Dragon Speak.
Oh, that's right.
You were working with that, and to this day he still does. When he wants to write something down, he dictates it using Dragon Speak, and the words appear on the screen. But making the transition to something that would be usable and something that people would actually be able.
It was done here in Los Angeles many, many years ago now. He did that in the 80s, and Caltech has this one, and the alumni house at Caltech has the chairman that you see in the living room.
Oh, yes.
Can we look at this again? We'll be back.
And as you came in, when you drove in, you saw that
I did.
Unity. That's at UCLA in the Tom Bradley building. He did this on the computer. And if you can look closely, you will see faces all around here. There are our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren are all in here.
Wow.
You want to
But
see that, Chris?
you have to look very closely to see them. It's
Who did this?
He did.
my son.
Oh, Richard.
Richard. Wow.
He's brilliant on the computer and he does all kinds of things.
That's
like it.
gorgeous.
The big sculpture, which is 14 feet high, is at Caltech
Oh,
in the Theater and Creative Arts Department. The family, which is my very, very favorite, I love them all, but this particular one, the family group,
right. That's gorgeous.
he did when we spent 2 summers in Italy. And he had that done in Italy. It is solid bronze. The reason I opened this is because I wanted to show you this. This was his first chairman.
Oh, chairman.
Oh. This was his first chairman. Now if you look at this, it then, from this, it evolved into that one. He made about a dozen of those, and they're all gone. They've all been sold.
Right, I can believe it.
Wow.
But this was the
that was your
original.
first one.
Beginning to think the tape recorders were a minor part.
We've been married for 72 years, and I still marvel at him.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I sure do appreciate this. I feel like we've taken too much of your time. But
Not at all. This is such a blessing to think that these memories are going to be encapsulated.
Wait till you get the bill for the lunch.
yeah. Oh boy, okay. Is that negotiable?
Just kidding.
No.
You
Hi.
did very well, dear.
Thank you.